The baby wouldn't stop crying, and the millionaire father was seconds away from firing everyone in the hospital lobby. But then, an old janitor picked up a tiny bottle of soap solution, blew a few trembling bubbles into the air, and what happened next left every single person frozen in silence. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that kindness can come from the most unexpected people, and sometimes, one small act can change an entire life forever. The rain crashed hard against the tall glass windows of St. Augustine Children's Hospital in downtown Chicago. Thunder rolled across the evening sky while nurses hurried through the bright hallways carrying charts and medicine trays. The emergency ward was overcrowded, parents were stressed, and the staff had already been working double shifts because of a dangerous flu outbreak spreading through the city. In the middle of the chaos sat a young father in a dark tailored suit worth more than most people's yearly salary. His name was Daniel Whitmore, one of the youngest tech millionaires in the country. Newspapers called him the Ice King of Silicon Valley because of his cold personality and emotionless public appearances. Investors admired him, employees feared him, journalists chased him, but tonight, none of that mattered. Because in his arms was his 6-month-old son, Noah, and the baby would not stop crying. Noah's tiny face was red from exhaustion. His little fists shook as tears rolled endlessly down his cheeks. Daniel looked helpless, completely helpless. The nurses had tried everything. Warm milk, toys, soft music, medicine. Nothing worked. The child had a severe fever and had been crying for almost 4 straight hours. "Sir, babies sometimes react this way under stress," one nurse explained carefully. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Do something. We are trying." "No," he snapped. "You're guessing." The nurse stepped back quietly. Everyone in the lobby knew exactly who Daniel Whitmore was. One complaint from him could threaten donations, funding, even careers. But the truth was simpler. Daniel wasn't angry because he was powerful. He was angry because he was terrified. 3 months earlier, Noah's mother had died unexpectedly after complications from a hidden heart condition. Since then, Daniel had been raising the baby alone while trying to run a billion-dollar company. He had nannies, assistants, chefs, drivers, everything money could buy. Everything except peace. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. He didn't understand babies. He didn't understand emotions. And deep down, he feared something horrible. What if Noah stopped loving him too? The baby screamed louder. People in the lobby began staring. Daniel rubbed his forehead, exhausted and desperate. "Please," he whispered softly to his son, his voice finally cracking. "Please stop crying." But Noah only cried harder. And that's when someone unexpected walked into the scene. An elderly janitor slowly pushed his cleaning cart across the shiny hospital floor. Most people never noticed him. His gray uniform was faded from years of washing. His shoes were worn. His hands looked rough from decades of hard work. A small name tag on his chest read, Walter. Walter was 68 years old and had worked at the hospital for nearly 20 years. Quiet, polite, invisible. Doctors rarely looked at him. Visitors barely acknowledged him. But Walter noticed everything. He noticed the tired nurse near tears. He noticed the terrified father pretending to be strong. And most importantly, he noticed the baby. Walter stopped beside a trash can and listened carefully to Noah's cries. Something about them felt familiar. Not spoiled, not angry, lonely. Walter slowly reached into the side pocket of his cleaning cart and pulled out a tiny plastic bottle filled with soap solution and a cheap bubble wand. One nurse blinked in confusion. "Walter, what are you doing?" The old man smiled gently. "Just trying something." Daniel looked up immediately. Irritation flashed across his face. "This is not the time." Walter nodded respectfully. "I understand, sir." He turned toward Noah anyway. Then, with slow gentle movements, Walter dipped the wand into the soap solution and blew a stream of tiny bubbles into the air. The glowing bubbles floated softly beneath the bright hospital lights. Blue, pink, silver, tiny floating worlds dancing silently through the air. Noah suddenly stopped crying. The entire lobby froze. The baby stared upward with wide watery eyes. Another bubble floated past his tiny hand. Then another. A tiny laugh escaped his mouth. A laugh. After hours of screaming and tears. Walter blew more bubbles carefully, smiling warmly as Noah reached upward with shaky little fingers. The baby giggled again, louder this time, completely mesmerized. The nurses looked shocked. One mother nearby covered her mouth emotionally. And Daniel Whitmore simply stared. For the first time that night, his son looked peaceful. Walter lowered the wand gently. "There we go," he whispered. Daniel looked at him carefully now, almost seeing him for the first time. "How did you do that?" Walter shrugged softly. "Babies don't always need solutions, sir. Sometimes they just need wonder." Those words hit Daniel harder than expected. Wonder. He realized Noah's life had become nothing but cold schedules, expensive toys, quiet nannies, and lonely rooms inside a giant mansion. Daniel had spent millions trying to provide everything, except warmth. Noah reached toward Walter again, smiling. And something painful twisted inside Daniel's chest. The old janitor had comforted his son in 30 seconds, while he couldn't do it in months. Walter returned the bubbles to his cart. "I should get back to work." "Wait." Walter stopped. Daniel stood slowly. "Stay." The nurses exchanged surprised looks. Daniel Whitmore never said, "Please." Never asked gently. Never invited strangers into his space. But tonight was different. Walter hesitated. "Sir, Noah likes you." The old janitor smiled sadly. "Children can sense hearts adults ignore." Daniel looked down silently. Then, almost ashamed, he asked, "Would you show me?" Walter blinked. "Show you what?" How to calm him. For several seconds, Walter said nothing. Then he picked up the bubble wand again and handed it carefully to Daniel. "Not too fast," Walter said. "Babies watch your face before they watch your hands." Daniel awkwardly dipped the wand into the soap. His first bubbles popped instantly. A few nurses quietly laughed. Daniel looked embarrassed. Walter chuckled softly. Again. The second try was better. Tiny bubbles floated upward. Noah squealed happily. And for the first time since his wife died, Daniel smiled. A real smile. Small. Broken. But real. Hours later, Noah's fever finally lowered enough for doctors to release him safely. The storm outside had calmed, and the hospital lobby was nearly empty now. Walter quietly resumed mopping the floor. Daniel approached him before leaving. "How long have you worked here?" 19 years. "And before that?" Walter paused. "I was a school music teacher." Daniel looked surprised. "Really?" Walter nodded. "What happened?" The old man looked down briefly. "Life happened." Slowly, Daniel learned the truth. Walter once had a wife named Eleanor and a little daughter named Lily. They were his entire world. But 25 years earlier, a drunk driver caused a terrible accident that took both their lives. Walter never fully recovered. He lost his home, his teaching, career collapsed from depression, and eventually, he took cleaning jobs just to survive. "But children still make me smile," Walter said softly while looking toward Noah. "Especially babies. They remind me that joy still exists somewhere." Daniel stood speechless. This quiet old janitor had suffered more pain than most people could imagine, yet somehow still carried kindness inside him. Daniel glanced around the hospital. People ignored Walter every single day. No expensive suit, no important title, no fame. And yet Walter possessed something Daniel realized he desperately lacked. Human warmth. The next morning, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the old man. At work, during meetings worth millions of dollars, he found himself distracted by one simple memory. Soap bubbles floating through hospital light. That evening, Daniel returned to St. Augustine Hospital. Walter was surprised to see him. "Sir." Daniel held out a small paper bag. "For you." Inside was a brand new professional bubble kit with dozens of colors and giant wands. Walter laughed for the first time in years. "This is unnecessary." "No," Daniel said quietly. "It isn't." From that day forward, Daniel began visiting regularly with Noah. Sometimes only for 10 minutes. Sometimes for hours. Walter taught Daniel small things no business school ever could. How babies respond to tone more than words. How silence can comfort people. How listening matters more than fixing. And slowly, Daniel changed. Employees noticed first. The cold billionaire began speaking kindly during meetings. He gave workers time off to see their families. He created childcare support programs inside his company. He even started smiling occasionally. News articles called it a mysterious transformation. But nobody knew the truth. It started with Bubbles. One afternoon, Daniel arrived at the hospital and found Walter sitting alone in the cafeteria staring quietly at an old photograph. Daniel sat beside him. "Your family?" Walter nodded. Daniel studied the picture carefully. A young Walter holding a little girl with bright curly hair. "Happy. Alive." "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered. Walter smiled weakly. "Grief never leaves. You just learn how to carry it." Daniel looked at Noah sleeping peacefully in his stroller. "I don't know how to be a father." Walter looked at him kindly. "Neither does any man at first. But what if I fail him?" "You will." Daniel looked startled. Walter chuckled gently. "Every parent fails sometimes. The important part is staying afterward." Those words stayed with Daniel forever. Months passed. Noah grew healthier and happier. And the bond between the millionaire and the janitor became something nobody expected: true friendship. Hospital workers watched in amazement as one of the richest men in America sat beside an elderly janitor eating cafeteria soup during lunch breaks. But not everyone liked it. One executive from Daniel's company privately warned him, "This relationship looks strange to investors." Daniel's face turned cold again, but not the old cold. A protective cold. Then they should learn what matters. The executive never mentioned it again. Winter arrived. Snow covered the city streets. One evening, Walter failed to show up for work. Daniel immediately felt uneasy. The hospital supervisor informed him quietly that Walter had collapsed in his apartment from heart problems. Daniel drove there immediately. The apartment was tiny, old furniture, leaking ceiling, almost no heat. Daniel stood frozen in disbelief. The man who had helped heal so many broken hearts had been living alone in silence and poverty. Walter weakly smiled from his bed. "Sorry about the mess." Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. Without hesitation, he arranged the best medical care possible. Private doctors, special treatment, a warm recovery home. Walter protested repeatedly. "I don't need charity." "This isn't charity," Daniel said firmly. "This is family." Walter broke into tears. Real tears he had hidden for decades. Noah crawled into Walter's lap and hugged him tightly. And the old man cried harder. For the first time since losing his daughter, someone needed him again. 1 year later, Daniel Whitmore stood on a large stage during a charity gala broadcast across the country. Reporters flashed cameras rapidly. Business leaders filled the ballroom. Everyone expected another corporate speech. Instead, Daniel invited a shy elderly man onto the stage. Walter looked terrified in his borrowed suit. Daniel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "A year ago," Daniel began, "I thought success meant power, money, and control. Then my son got sick, and a janitor with soap bubbles taught me what being human really means." The room fell silent. Daniel continued emotionally, "This man reminded me that kindness has more value than wealth. Compassion changes lives. Attention matters. Love matters." Walter lowered his head, overwhelmed. Daniel smiled toward him. "Today, our company is donating $50 million to children's hospitals across the country. And this foundation will carry one name." A giant screen lit up behind them. "The Walter Foundation for Children and Families." The audience erupted into applause. Walter covered his mouth in shock. Daniel leaned closer and whispered, "Invisible people deserve to be seen too." Tears rolled down Walter's cheeks. Across the ballroom, little Noah clapped excitedly while holding a small bubble wand in his tiny hands. And in that beautiful moment, Daniel finally understood something his wife once tried to teach him long ago. People rarely remember how rich you were, but they always remember how you made them feel. So if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. Because somewhere tonight, someone feels invisible. And maybe, your kindness could be the bubble that brings them back to hope.